Hello YouTubers, Toby Till here with Rocky Mountain Snow MX. We are here to provide you with all of your snow bike related technical videos and also any parts or accessories you may need for your snow bike. Feel free to give us a call, 720-263-7533. C3 thermostat. Time to install this bad boy. 24 KTM. Most of these are the same from 23 on newer as far as how they're installed and all that good stuff. The coolant flow, just so everybody can kind of get an idea of how this really works. Coolant, of course, gets generated in a pressure from the pump, then gets pumped in through the housing of the block, out of the block, into the frame, out of the frame, into the top of the radiators. It gets cooled off, then exits the radiators at the bottom, comes over to this one, then gets sucked out of the right-hand radiator, back into the pump, and starts the circulation again. The thermostat gets put in place of the top hose so that when you are not up to temperature, depending on what you order your thermostat at, if you order one through us, we make sure and spec out the right temperature for your application. But basically what's going to happen is that the water pump's going to generate pressure, come up to the thermostat, hit the closed thermostat, exit the thermostat, and go back into the suction side of the water pump if you don't have heated bars. If you do have heated bars, it will come up to the thermostat, hit the closed thermostat, go out the port of the thermostat into the bars, go through the bars, come out of the bars, and go back into the inlet of the water pump. When this reaches the set temperature, it will open up and allow coolant now to flow, not only through the bars, but also flow into the radiators, go through the radiators, get cooled, and get sucked back out. That's why you can run this thermostat during the summer, during the winter. It does not have to come back out if you're converting back over. Thermostats work absolutely awesome. They're kind of a sight unseen thing, but they do a really good job of getting your bike up to temperature and allowing it to work correctly. I don't ever like to shut off the valve to my handlebars completely. I always like to have a little bit of flow. There is a bypass hole in this thermostat that will allow it to flow, but I just still don't like to deadhead it like that, so I always keep my valve open a little bit and keep a little bit of temperature in my bars. It doesn't hurt anything. So that's just kind of me. To install this thermostat in the KTM, the easiest way to know which direction this thing goes, right? You always want to have flow from the head out towards. So you can look in this end and see the gold part. That's the end with the thermostat. You can look in this end and you can see a direct flow through hole, meaning that the water comes out of the head and can go into your handlebars or into the bypass back to the suction. So you always want your temperature gauge and your bypass, whether it's your handlebars or your actual bypass line, going back to the water pump, on the flow head side of it. Don't put your thermostat in backwards. Put it in to where you have outlet of the head and out through your bypass or handlebars and back to the water pump. That's how to tell the difference on which way to install. In the C3 kit, of course, you're going to have some hose clamps, a bypass line if you're not running heated handlebars, and a couple other hoses. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to outfit our thermostat with the fittings that we need and get it ready to install. I've done a whole bunch of these, so I know exactly what I want. So we're going to outfit this thing and get it ready to go in. Basically, I'm going to run one port for my temperature sensor in the Voyager Pro for this bike and this customer. I'm going to run the other port for my heated handlebars, and then I'm going to plug the third port. That's what I'm doing now, is just installing the plug in the third port. You guys want to meet Shop Dog? Come here, Si. Come here, say hi to everybody. This is Shop Dog. This is Siren. Say hi. They don't have any food. You don't want anything to do with it, don't you? All right, so I'll go ahead and finish taping up all of my fittings. Even though they do come with a thread sealant tape on them, I always add Teflon just because you want to make sure that you don't have to go back in and deal with leaks and all that good stuff. So this just saves me time in the long run. And of course, it saves my customers money because they're not chasing tail and leaks. All right, and then as far as the temperature gauge goes, this is the port that I've selected for the temperature gauge. You always want to make sure that your temperature gauge does not go in and hit the thermostat. So you can see I'm going to put my temperature gauge in, and you can see it going in, and it's not touching anything on the inside, right? After you completely screw it in, you also want to do that same double check. Make sure that the tip of the temperature probe is not protruding in and hitting anything inside of the thermostat. These KTM thermostats, that's really not a possibility, but in some YZ and Honda applications, if you put it in the wrong hole, you will hit the thermostat. So right now I'm just pulling off my hose clamps. Remember which way they were on, because if you do not put them back the same way, you may not be able to tighten up the hose clamps and things like that when you have the exhaust and everything back on the bike. Let's see, so you can see that this end of the hose is larger than the other. The large end of the hose goes up onto the frame mount, the frame mount. Put your hose clamp on so you can get to it. And then same thing here. We are going to put this guy on. Hose clamps. Like your little Windex. Windex is a real common lube that I use around here for hoses, for things that I need to kind of come on and off but don't need any residue on and don't want it to affect what's inside. Put my hose with a Windex on that side, hose clamp in place. That's where I'll be able to get to it, which I'll get to it from the other side. Onto the C3 thermostat. Same thing here. Underneath with that guy. And go front side with that guy. Okay, so now what I want to do is just orientate everything, right? So the first thing that I'm going to put on is the frame rail, because that's always the toughest to get to. Let me open up this hose clamp just a little bit more so it's easier to work with. Because I'm going to put this thermostat on a couple times. Sometimes I don't even put the hose clamps on because they just kind of get in the way when I'm on and off with it, which that is the case right now. Okay, so upper frame hose is on. It was on. And if you struggle with that, you can take it off. Put it on just by itself. Then you can put your thermostat in it. Make sure that the ways that you have your fittings are not rubbing on the plastic valve cover. And so I am rubbing slightly, and I don't like it. So I'm going to cut a little off of this hose so that I don't have any rub on that plastic valve cover. So about 1/4 inch is what I've got coming off. Now, I've got plenty of room, no matter what vibrates around, no matter what's moving around, to have my thermostat in here, my temperature probe, all good. All right, so now that I've got that hose cut and configured like I want it, I'm going to go ahead and put a hose clamp on the upper part. So I leave the upper part in there. I've got it angled the way that I want it. Put my hose clamp on so that it doesn't move around as I'm fitting the rest of the thermostat pieces. Okay, we're going to check that orientation one more time before we continue on with the rest, because the last thing you want to do is cut a hose and it not be right. All right, so centered up, I'm orientated correctly. Let's go ahead and try our other C3 hose. Put it on the block. Push it onto that hose. perfect fit. I've got clearance between the thermostat, between the block, between the head. Everything is not touching. That's exactly how you want it, because if you're rubbing on anything, you're going to rub holes in it. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to go ahead and run my handlebar hoses down. So what I do is I take this hose, center it up on the triple clamps like so, run it in front of my wiring, through over the top of the top radiator mount against the frame, and down through the frame and across. Okay? I'll set my handlebar, my front fender straight. Triple clamps got moved around. Okay, so I'm going to set my front handlebar, upper triple clamp straight. I'm going to rest the hose right in the middle of the fork on the triple clamp, so I have enough room. I'm going to push the hose down in, and so that's going to be my length. I am going to now measure this as it comes across. As you can see, the hose comes perfectly into my 90-degree fitting and will absolutely go right in to where I want it to be. So all I'm going to do now is just mark this so that I know where to cut it. And I'm going to mark it at the base of the fitting, and I'll cut. Pull this out. I'll get my cutters that are right here. I'll cut on my mark. Now, my hose is the right length. As we discussed in a previous video with handlebars, I have this cool little measuring deal that I have marked out to be the proper insertion length of the hose into the fitting. I will mark that length on the hose that I just cut. Now, you can see, right? All I did was create a mark like this on a demo piece of tube, right? That's how far that this tube will go into any of these fittings, right? When it's bottomed out in that fitting, it's going to be all the way in there like this. So I literally just transfer that distance to every piece of tube that I cut, and I know when it's going to be into the fitting all the way down and not leak. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my thermostat back off, okay? Because I always put hoses in with no bind. If I were to leave that thermostat in and I were to bolt that thermostat into place and try to maneuver this line in there and jimmy it around and cock it, I'd cut an O-ring for sure. Trust me, I did it in the early days. And I finally learned my way. So now what I do, generous mount on the end of the tube, have the thermostat in my hand. Pull the tube as far as I can this way to get it out in the open. Line up my fitting with the tube super straight. So it just goes right in, right? Get it to the shark bite, wiggle it around a little bit, twist it around, get that lube really all over inside of that fitting. Then I'll give it a little push and get through the shark bite. I felt the first drop. I've got a better display of how all this goes in my handlebar video, so go back and watch that. I do it right in front of the camera. Now that I'm through the shark bite, I'm going to go ahead and give it some more wiggle, but still keeping super straight and get it pushed through the O-ring. Once I get through the O-ring, I'll be up to my mark and I'll know that I'm all the way in. And so I'm holding the fitting, holding the thermostat. Everything is super straight, right? I'm not cutting the O-ring in any way. And I'm applying just a little bit of pressure to get through the O-ring and get it to drop all the way down in. Without being at an angle, without cutting the O-ring. That's your real goal, is to make sure that you put the line into the fitting straight and don't cut the O-ring. There we go. Now I got the final drop to the O-ring. My mark is right at the top of the fitting. Life is good. Now all I have to do is go ahead and put everything together for one last assembly. All right, so just a little bit of lube on hoses, make life good. Push the thermostat up into the frame hose, seat it fully, rotate my thermostat where I want it. Push the block hose down on, check my clearances with everything, rotate it slightly if I need to. Make sure that I have clearance on all things involved. And then tighten down the hose clamp for the last time. You want to make sure that the hose clamp is seated on the hose to where when you tighten it up, you have a little bit of swell and push on the thermostat side. That shows you that your hose is being tightened up past the barb of the thermostat. So you want your hose clamp to be between the thermostat and the end of the hose so that you get a little bit of seating and push as you tighten up. Okay, there is our thermostat install. What's up, Ty?
Good.
All right, so we got clearance on the thermostat, of the hose, of the fitting, of the temperature gauge. Temperature gauge sender now can be run up with all the rest of the wires. Ty, you want to come over on this side?
Yep.
I run this temperature gauge sending unit through the channel. Go ahead and push that through there, all the way up to the front. Bring it down with the rest of these wires right there. And now we're going to do the lower hose. Lower hose is basically the exact same kind of program, right? Take the lower hose off. Sometimes you got to break the seal on these hoses. I use this little Carter key puller hose pick to do so. Just run it all the way around. Pull the hose. Take the lower hose off, hose clamps off. Now we got the C3 hose. It looks like that, which the factory hose looks like that. Pretty cool, exactly the same. We want to run a straight fitting in this guy, so we're gonna use the straight fitting.
How tight do you want this?
Not very tight, it's just got to plug in. So just give it some slack. Put our fitting into here. It is possible to crack this brass fitting in the hose. I've had customers do that, so don't get crazy with it. It's an 1/8 inch pipe thread. You don't have to get gorilla with it. You just have to seat the threads and get it in there far enough to seal. That's why we use some pipe thread to help with that. There we go. All right, so same kind of deal, right? No hose clamps yet. We're gonna measure our hose, do that kind of thing. So we're gonna put this onto the block, put it onto the lower radiator, get all the hoses seated all the way in. We're gonna look and see. Right now, this fitting is rubbing on the lower radiator crossover hose. I don't care for that. I will not install this way. So, if I cut this lower hose slightly, it will probably pull that off and give me some spacing. So, this lower hose just a little bit, put it back on, see what that did to my spacing. Okay, now I got about a 1/4 inch clearance between the fitting and my lower radiator hose with that cut, so that was perfect. I'm going to go ahead and run my handlebar hose once again through the top of the radiators. Bring it over and down, get ready for my measurement. I make sure that it is going to be cut at the right length. I put it dead center in the middle of the fork over there. Tuck it up close to the wiring with a little bit of slack. Come down here to my fitting. Get ready with my crayon. Pull it down here. Hold my finger on it. Look at my hoses one more time. That's the spacing that I want. That's the gap that I want. Make a mark on it. Then I'll get my C3 cutter. Cut it at the mark. I guess it's time for a new cutter. That was done. All right, once I've cut at the mark, it's now time to transfer my measurement. Actually, let me see that tie. Probably why that broke is because I did a really bad cut. That is a huge angle, so let me straighten that back up.
I'm gonna throw in that door.
Yes, please. Okay, now that's straight. All right, so now I'm going to transfer the measurement mark for my full depth insertion into the fitting. I'm going to get my O-ring lube. Decorate the end of this really well with O-ring lube. And, just like I did before, hose outside of the bike. Don't try to put this in the bike. That's how you cut O-rings. You will see that this process is so easy that if you do it this way, you never cut an O-ring, you never have a problem. Put it in, get it to the shark bite, roll it around, get the lube all over, push it through the shark bite. Once again, you're down on the O-ring. Put it in, roll it around, get that lube all over the O-ring. Give it one small light pressure push until you seat to your mark. You know it's all the way in. Give it a pull back out. Now you're mounted. Life is good. We're going to do final assembly. A little lube to help it go on. We got our hose clamps. We'll make sure and put our hose clamps in the same orientation that they were so that they're easy to get to when you're fully assembled. Always think about your hose clamps, right? Because if they're not easily assembled and taken apart, you gotta do dumb things like take exhaust off and all that kind of stuff to get your hose clamps off. So. Block on, radiator on. Check your clearance. Rotate your hoses if you need to rotate it slightly. Hold your hose clamp into place. Rotate it so you can get your socket on. More rotation. Now that I'm really tight, I have to make sure that the band of the hose clamp is far enough off of the end of the hose and still behind the bar on both ends. Let's check that again, and I am touching. So if I don't like that, loosen up. Roll things just a little bit in the hose. You can make up for a decent amount of things touching. One, by shortening the hose. Two, by just rolling the hose on the barb. And then tighten down the clamp once you got it rolled. Now, I got clearance on both. I got clearance on the thermostat. I got clearance on the hose. I'm not rubbing on either. I'm not going to rub any lines or hoses. So now, there is C3 thermostat installed. When you're running heated bars, you're going to have hoses and a bypass line all left over when you're said and done. At this point, we can fill the radiator back up, and the bike will be ready to run and run in. I just go over, push my hose clamps around one more time, make sure that I got them all good, and we're good to go. All right, there's thermostat install.
Hello YouTubers, Toby Till here with Rocky Mountain Snow MX. We are here to provide you with all of your snow bike related technical videos and also any parts or accessories you may need for your snow bike. Feel free to give us a call, 720-263